all. Welcome back to the Brighter Black Futures podcast. I'm your host, Bisa Dobson. Today I've got a great show for you. Today I'm going to lean into my love of history and start the first in a series of podcasts that will be about historical figures from the past. And today I'm focusing on four amazing Black women you may or may not have heard about because their stories are important and they need to be shared. And each week over the next few weeks, I'm going to do a different segment of the Black community so you can hear about different types of people doing awesome things from all around the globe. So without further ado, let's get into it. And now it's time for the upliftment segment of the show. And this is the time when I share a quote that I absolutely love, that inspires me and uplifts me, and hopefully will do the same for you, and also ties in with the theme of the show. And since we're talking about strong and powerful Black women from history, I want to share a quote from a strong and powerful Black woman, and that woman is Serena Williams. And the quote is, "The success of every woman should be an inspiration to another. We should raise each other up. Make sure you're courageous, be strong, be extremely kind, and above all, be humble." I love that quote because she's talking about the fact that we should be inspired by each other and work to help each other while being amazing, strong, humble, courageous in our own rights, and kind, of course, instead of nitpicking and fighting and with each other and not supporting each other because we feel we're in competition for limited resources, according to the power structures that be, because when we work together and lift each other up, of course, we all do better and rise together. So I think that quote has a really beautiful message for women especially, but I think anyone who is a human and who wants to be out there empowering themselves and empowering others by doing their part to uplift them, while being kind and courageous and humble and all the things she mentioned, can get value from this quote. And I hope all of you out there did. And before I go, let me say it one more time because I think it is so amazing. The quote is, "The success of every woman should be an inspiration to another. We should raise each other up. Make sure you're courageous, be strong, be extremely kind, and above all, be humble." Love it. And now it's time for the Black History segment, because today I'm going to, as I said at the top, I'm going to share the stories of four amazing Black women throughout history who made great contributions in the areas of music, art, literature, etc. It's going to be great, and let's get into it. The first person I want to tell you all about is a woman by the name of Eleanor Collins. She's a talented artist whose contributions to music and television left an indelible mark on the landscape of music in Canada. Eleanor was born in 1920 in Edmonton, Alberta, as Eleanor Ruth Proctor, and eventually went on to be known as Canada's First Lady of Jazz. And she was often compared to her contemporary, Ms. Lena Horne. Now, from a young age, Eleanor showed a passion and natural talent for music, and at just 3 years old, she began performing in church, captivating audiences with her voice. Then, in 1934, at the age of 15, she won her first singing contest. She went on to move to Vancouver in the late 30s, where she sang from 1940 to 1942 with the CBC, that's the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, with a gospel group called Swing Low Quartet, which included her sisters Ruby Sneed and Pearl Brown. Pearl also performed until 1947 with the Ray Norris Jazz Quintet, and her work on the CBC allowed her to reach a broad audience and lay the groundwork for her future endeavors. Collins began to perform frequently in the 1950s, becoming known as Vancouver's First Lady of Jazz. In 1954, she made her television debut on CBC Vancouver's groundbreaking variety show Bambula, A Day in the West Indies, the first Canadian television show with a mixed race cast. This was groundbreaking at the time, as well as the first live music TV show broadcast from Vancouver. CBC management was so impressed with the audience reaction to Bambula, they quickly gave Collins her own variety series, The Eleanor Show, and this was also historic. It ran from June 19th to September 1155, and The Eleanor Show made Collins the first female Canadian singer to ever have her own television show, and even more importantly, Collins was the first Black headliner of a TV show in an era where the vast majority of TV stars were white. Due to racial prejudice, lots of Black artists didn't get any access to television, and Eleanor's show was groundbreaking. So although the Eleanor Show was quite short-lived, Collins guest starred on numerous CBC TV and radio shows throughout the 1950s and 60s, singing blues, jazz standards, spirituals, and gospel music, which garnered her a large audience. Now, Collins continued to perform throughout Canada until a few years before her death in January of 2022, and in recognition for her great contributions to Canadian jazz music, Eleanor received many awards, including being inducted into the Bisa Entertainment Hall of Fame in 1992, becoming a member of the Order of Canada in 2014, and in 2022, Canada Post released a commemorative stamp in her honor. And if you haven't checked out Eleanor's music before, be sure to do so. Her voice is beautiful. If you're a jazz fan like me, I'm sure you'll love her music. And that's the story of Eleanor Collins. Now, the second person I want to tell you about is a woman by the name of Tracy Souders, who was born on February 7th, 1897 in Frankfort, Kansas, as Teresa Ann Souders. She was the only child of her parents, Robert Souders and Lavinia Ann Bryant. And after graduating from Frankfort High School in 1918, she moved to Kansas City, Missouri, where she was employed as a maid in private homes, a job that she unfortunately had to do for most of her working life because she wasn't able to excel and exceed in the industry she wanted to be in due to racial prejudice. Now, it's unclear of how Souders got her start in the film-making business, but she did act in an amateur theatrical production, a morality play entitled Every Negro, which was written by the Reverend A. Lawrence Kimbrough of the Hosley Chapel Christian Methodist Episcopal Church of Frankfort in 1918. 4 years later, in 1922, she became the first known African-American female director when the Afro-American Film Exhibitors Company of Baltimore and Dallas, Texas, contracted her to distribute her film, A Woman's Era. Bellwood magazine for January 28th of 1922, this is volume 34, issue 107, published the company's announcement that A Woman's Era was the first of its kind to be produced by a young woman of our race and has been passed on by the critics as a picture of true to Negro life. Sometime between 1923 and 1926, Souders moved to Los Angeles, California, in hopes of getting into the motion picture business. However, she was never able to accomplish her goal and instead continued to work as a domestic in private homes to support herself. In 1935, she married Oscar C. West, a native of Richmond, Virginia, who ran a pool hall in Watts. The marriage was short-lived, however, and by 1940 she was living in San Francisco, where she remained until she died on January 17th of 1995, just before her 98th birthday. As a tribute to Souders' legacy, the Tracy Souders Film Society was formed in 2001 in San Francisco as an outgrowth of the International Black Women's Festival, IBWFF, and in 2008, the IBWFF established the Tracy Souders Award, Tracy's, also known as the Black Laurel Awards. So this is a woman who made a great contribution to film, being the first woman ever to direct a film in the U.S., and she deserves to be recognized and remembered as somebody who contributed to American film, particularly Black film history in America. Now, the third woman I want to tell you about is a woman who hails from Colombia. Her name is Teresa Martinez de Varela, and she was born on July 1st of 1913 in Quito, Colombia. She was an Afro-Colombian educator, writer, playwright, and social leader, and she became a pivotal figure in advocating for the rights of Black women in Colombia. Teresa's commitment to education led her to work at the Escuela Pinar del Rio, where she inspired countless students. Her teaching methods were innovative, focusing on cultural pride and community development. Her activism extended well beyond the classroom as well. She actively participated in organizations aimed at improving the lives of Afro-Colombians and advocated for their representation in literature and politics. In 2010, her contributions were recognized when selected works were included in an anthology published by the Ministry of Culture, highlighting her influence on Colombian literature. She also served as the Secretary of Education for the Choco Department, working tirelessly to enhance educational opportunities for marginalized communities in Colombia. Her efforts were instrumental in promoting literacy and cultural awareness for Black Colombians. In addition to her educational work, Teresa authored several important literary pieces that captured the essence of Afro-Colombian culture and reflected the struggles and triumphs of her people. Though she had difficulty finding publishers, Teresa's literary output was prolific. She wrote like a beast, folks. She was everywhere. She published poems and essays assessing the cultural, historical, and political issues facing Colombia. Her work showed a deep understanding of the history of the country, as well as its literary and musical traditions. She published dramatic works, including El 9 de Abril, April 9th, which was a protest of the assassination in 1948 of the presidential candidate George Eliezer Gaitán, and an opera, La Virgen Loca, The Crazy Madonna. So prolific, and she put her hand in everything: poems, essays, operas, even. Teresa did it all. Teresa Martinez de Varela passed away on June 16 of 1998, but her legacy lives on in her written works, and also her famous son, Jairo Varela, who was a prominent musician and also the founder of Grupo Nietzsche, paid tribute to her in many of his songs. And now you know all about Teresa Martinez de Varela. And if you happen to be a Spanish speaker, or you can get your hands on a translation of her work, you should definitely check her out as well. A very important person and woman in history who made great contributions to her country. I'm super excited to share the story of the last woman I want to tell you about. The last Black woman who's doing amazing things currently. She's still alive. In her industry, and that is Dame Patricia Ann McGrath, commonly known as Pat McGrath, who is considered to be the greatest makeup artist of all time. She's a pioneer in the industry, been working for 30 years, and is considered to be the person who has set almost every makeup trend over the last few decades. Big things. So let's get into the story of Pat McGrath. Now, Pat McGrath is a makeup artist of Jamaican ancestry who was born in Northampton, England in 1971. In a working class household, she was raised by her mother, Jean, who was a dressmaker. And Pat credits her mother, Jean, her mother's interest in fashion and beauty, for her deciding to make her foray into both industries. They watch Hollywood movies, old Hollywood movies, when Pat was a child, starting as young as 6, and her mother would take tips from them on how to do her own makeup. Now, at that time, there was no makeup on the market for people with darker skin. All the makeup available in Britain was for people with lighter skin, or white women primarily. And her mother had to be innovative, and Pat watched her mix all kinds of concoctions to make makeup that would suit her skin. So she'd put cocoa powder into a makeup and mix it up, and then put it on her face, and it would work perfectly for her skin. So Pat learned to be very innovative, and also learned the idea that if you don't see something you need, go out there and make it. And that's exactly what she did as she went on to develop her career. So Pat had no formal training as a makeup artist ever. She's never had any. She just took what she learned from her mother and ran with it. She's entirely self-taught. The only schooling she did formally was completing an art foundation course at Northampton College. So her biggest inspiration was not in school, but outside in the world, where she was part of the underground club culture in 1980s London. And at that time, the big thing was the New Romantics. That energy, that vibe in London was very bold and colorful and expressive. And of course, Pat started to do her own makeup that way. It was bold, expressive, and eventually it got her discovered. That makeup she was doing in that bold way got her discovered. She was on set for a music show, about to watch Spandau Ballet perform, and a Radio 1 presenter by the name of Janice Long noticed her in the crowd and said, "Hey, can you do what's on your face on me?" And so it began. Pat realized she would have a career in makeup as a makeup artist. Now, when she started her career as a makeup artist in the 1990s, there were a ton of rules. And one of the chief rules was that makeup had to be undetectable, really light and as plain as possible, to not be detected by people. And Pat said, "Nah, not me. I'm going to break those rules." And she started putting bold colors on people and models who were then in fashion magazines, and people started to take notice. And eventually her work was noticed by some of the biggest names in the fashion industry. One name in particular helped to boost her career immensely, and that is Steven Meisel, who is known as one of the greats, if not the greatest, fashion photographer ever. And when he started to work with her and they created some iconic covers together, Pat got noticed, and it also opened many doors for her, because people said, if Steve was working with her, I want to work with her. And Pat McGrath was on her way. She had officially made a name for herself. So she became in high demand for shows and for fashion houses and brands, and she was adored by makeup artists and models alike. So, at the height of her career, she was known to come to shows with 87 trunks of makeup, props, and books that she pulled inspiration from to create the many amazing looks she created over the course of her career. And she was super creative. Even when she had all this expensive makeup to use, she was still using things like mud and paper and vinyl rubber and fake crocodile skin, beads, sequins, and feathers to achieve all the looks she wanted to create that were dramatic, bold, and beautiful. Pat went on to lead the beauty direction for brands like Prada and Miu Miu, and later became the global cosmetic creative design director for Procter & Gamble, helping brands like CoverGirl and SK2. Her CV also includes working with Alexander McQueen, Dolce & Gabbana, Jill Sander, and Versace. And over the course of her 30-year career, she's done over 1,000 shows. 1,000 shows this one makeup artist has done because she's in such high demand. And most notably and most recently, she broke the internet with the glass skin look she created specifically for the spring show that happened in January, spring collection show that happened in January of this year for Margiela. It was amazing. It was based on something she created by herself using her makeup line as well as other makeup lines. And the great thing about Pat is she never holds back on sharing what she creates with her audience and her fans. She shared the process in a live a few weeks later because people were so excited about how to create that look at home, so other people would know how to do what she created. So of course, Pat has had many successes throughout her career because again, she's known as the greatest makeup artist ever. She lots of success, lots of accolades. However, her career path was not free of challenges. Based on her success in the industry, she decided to pitch the idea of her own makeup line to major cosmetic executives in the early 2000s, and she kept being told no. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody wants to do the makeup you do behind the scenes at fashion shows in real life. It's never going to sell. We're not going to back you. But Pat kept going, and she eventually got on social media when social media began to, take over the interwebs, and she developed a large following, over 500,000 followers, and she kept hearing from them, "Why don't you have a makeup line? We need a Pat McGrath makeup line. Make this makeup line." So she decided to launch it on her own. And the first product she made, a product called Gold 001, sold out in seconds. It was only 1,000 units. It sold out in seconds, and Pat McGrath Labs took off from there. By 2019, just 4 years after she started her Pat McGrath Labs line, the company was $1 billion company. So, even though executives told her she'd never make it, she certainly did. And in recognition for her many contributions to the fashion and beauty industry, in 2017, Pat won the Isabella Blow Award at the British Fashion Awards and was listed as Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in 2018. But most significantly, in 2021, Pat McGrath became the first ever makeup artist to become a Dame of the British Order, a recognition for her work in the fashion and beauty industry and promoting diversity in that space. And now you know all about Pat McGrath, somebody who I think is great. I don't wear any makeup myself, but I'm so fascinated by her journey, her innovativeness, and how she created something despite the fact that people told her she couldn't and did it well. All right, that's it for today's Black History Moment segment, this extended segment about four fabulous women. So I hope you all enjoyed learning about Eleanor Collins, Canada's first lady of jazz, Tracy Suters, the first ever Black woman to direct a film in the United States, way back in 1922, Teresa Martinez de Varela, a prolific writer in Colombia who wanted to uplift her community, particularly Black women, and end depression for Afro-Colombians, and finally, Pat McGrath, the greatest makeup artist of all times, setting trends and pioneering new techniques as she goes. All right. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, take care. Bye.